My name is Tabitha Dussel, and this is my older adult presentation. I have chosen to focus on stage 6 of Erikson's life stages. This stage is young adulthood, and it focuses on intimacy versus identity. During this stage, young adults look for intimacy in their close relationships. They use the skills they have developed throughout their lives to try and gain as well as maintain intimacy. These skills also help people learn more about their own identity and who they want to be moving into adulthood. People learn to give and take from their significant others while maintaining their own identity, which helps to form healthy relationships. According to Rogers, if intimacy is not established in the young adulthood stage, that person is risking isolation as they move into adulthood. As cited by O'Connor et al., they state young adulthood is a time to explore roles in life while not having clear expectations for themselves. My interviewee decided he was going to try and join the military intelligence unit at a young age. He went to the recruiter and they told him they only accept people who score a 100% on the test required. He took the test and scored a 98%, so he was not accepted. There were over 100 other men who also took this test, and my interviewee reported that none of them scored over a 90%. The recruiter told my interviewee that he can be anything he wants in any unit, but he cannot have the military intelligence unit position. My interviewee told the recruiter to forget it, and he will not be joining the military. 1 week later, his mom called him while he was at work and saw on the TV that he had been drafted. He believes the recruiter had turned him in for scoring so high on the military intelligence testing. 1 week after he found out he was being drafted, he left for South Carolina for about 6 months between the basic training and the infantry training. He was then sent to Fort Dick in New Jersey for another week before being sent to Vietnam. Once he arrived in Vietnam, he had to do a week of jungle training. He was no longer given a choice as to what unit he was going to be in, and he was placed into the 1st Infantry Division and was in Vietnam for 13 months. He was stationed in Lê Cai as his home base. According to Chesters et al., social conditions and people having less sense of control in their young adulthood stage can greatly impact their future. It's also important to note that Sneed et al. States that the stages leading up to young adulthood help us develop the ability to trust others so that we can later establish healthy relationships so we can figure out our own identity. Some challenges leading up to young adulthood for my interviewee was that he did not have a very nurturing family. His father was an alcoholic and would come home from the bar after work and beat on him and his siblings. His mother often used tough love and would never stop his father from beating them, as she was also afraid. So that is understandable to an extent. His father would also cheat on his mother with women from whorehouses, is what my interviewee had referred to them as. From birth, we are supposed to form a bond with our caretakers. Witnessing the violence and unloving relationship between his parents did not help my interviewee as he grew into a young adult. As Furman et al. States, young adulthood is a time to establish intimacy. Sometimes these early relationships are not healthy because people aren't given an adequate amount of necessary skills to form a healthy relationship, which is basically what had happened with my interviewee, as he did not have people in healthy, loving relationships around him in his environment growing up. Between the lack of healthy relationships and knowledge in these younger stages of life, and then being drafted to war at the beginning of young adulthood, my interviewee faced the challenge of not being able to form healthy, intimate relationships. Being thrown into the 1st Infantry Division also did not allow much time for him to figure out his own identity either. Although my interviewee did not develop many relationships or work on figuring out his own identity, he did realize that he did not want to be an infantryman. He realized he enjoyed serving his country, and if younger, he said he would do it all over again. He would not want to be in the infantry unit. He knew that that was not something he wanted to be recognized or remembered for. During this time, my interviewee was awarded 2 Vietnam medals, 2 Bronze Stars, which are given for performing acts of bravery, and awarded a Combat Infantry Badge, which is given when you're involved in so many hours of combat time. My interviewee appeared very proud of these accomplishments, even though he wasn't thrilled being in that unit. He seemed to have a sense of self-acceptance and a different kind of sparkle in his eye when he was telling me about the accomplishments and the medals that he was given. Even though my interviewee's life stages didn't appear typical, he did learn more about himself and figured out that he wanted more out of his life than his parents ever had or were ever able to offer. The stage of young adulthood, like previously stated, is focused on intimacy and identity. My interviewee did not go through a normal crisis in this stage of life. He did adjust to the environment and the event that was happening, as it wasn't really planned. The psychosocial crisis for my interviewee is that he really was not able to develop an intimate relationship or given the opportunity to figure out his own identity. Times were just much different back then. Being drafted at 20 years old, which is the prime time to develop intimacy and identity in this young adulthood stage, was taken from him by no fault of his own. Coming from a lower class family, my interviewee reported he never had issues with people of other ethnicities, gender, religion, or race. He made it a point to tell me that his best friend throughout his time in Vietnam was an African American man, which not everybody approved of. He also noted that he was friends with this man for a few years after they were discharged from the military, as he only lived 1 state away. My interviewee reported he did not care much about where people came from or what they believed in, as long as they were good people. They all got sent to Vietnam, most of them not by choice, but they had to go and do a job together. He reported that it was much more important to him that he had the backs of those other men so that he knew that they would also have his back during combat or other jobs that were necessary to complete. My interviewee voiced he worked hard for everything that he's ever had. He knew he wasn't going to be able to further his education on his own, so he was eventually grateful that he was drafted to learn some skills that the military had taught him. He voiced that if he were younger today, he would re-enlist in a heartbeat, but avoid the infantry unit. Being drafted helped facilitate my interviewee becoming a respectable man who opened up his own business. He worked for the Pennsylvania State for many years and worked in Washington, D.C. for many years. He was a locksmith. He explained that he was very, very well trusted and even most of the time worked with big banking companies, either on the main doors or on their safes. As far as oppression goes, I believe being drafted put a halt on my interviewee's life stage of young adulthood. He witnessed gruesome war zones, he was forced to shoot at people, and was also shot at. Traumatic experience can also put a halt to personal growth at any stage of life. He was not given the adequate amount of time that other young adults have to develop intimacy and to figure out their own identity. He basically had to start the phase later than other people of his time. It didn't appear that he had much control at this stage of his own life, when things are already confusing, especially in young adulthood. This stage of life helps us transition into adulthood and is the time to develop the skills to move forward in life. Young adulthood and the skills you learn during this time are essential for the future. Using multi-systems lens, I believe that my interviewee, his family, and the larger social policy at that time hindered his life stage as far as intimacy goes. Between his environment and witnessing the unfaithful relationship between his parents, he truly was not able to develop as many healthy relationship skills as someone in a nurturing, loving home would have as a child. The larger social policy of this time, or being drafted, definitely hindered his ability to learn about intimate relationships. Witnessing all of the violence also would not have been good for his mental health or his emotions either, especially being around a bunch of men who, especially back then, were to put on a tough emotional state of mind and not share feelings and not cry or be sentimental. I also believe that the larger social policy hindered or maybe even postponed the opportunity to figure out his own identity, as he was basically told how to act and what to do. There was not much room in the military for him to be himself. After being honorably discharged, he worked towards his own aspirations of owning his own business, and he did become that well-known, respectable locksmith. Another theoretical perspective I believe relates to my interviewee's life stage is Albert Bandura's social learning theory. This theory explains that people are active agents in their learning. They are able to think about processes in learning and actively interact with their surroundings. People model others and learn by watching them. I believe the environment my interviewee grew up in played a role in how he struggled to develop healthy relationships in young adulthood and adulthood. Witnessing his parents' relationship and learning that that may be the norm did not set him up for a successful relationship as a young adult. For example, my interviewee got married shortly after returning home from the war and was divorced within 14 months. They were both cheating on each other, and that's what my interviewee had watched his father do to his mother. He said he did regret this action, but at that time he was young and didn't know much better. He came home and basically he stated he was trying to catch up on everything that he had missed out on while being away. Some limitations that I have come up with regarding the young adulthood stage in my interviewee's case would be that he did not grow up in a normal time. Even if a draft would have to be conducted today, it would still be considered abnormal. Another limitation would be that back then, only males were in the military. My interviewee, being heterosexual, his chances at developing an intimate relationship while being away at war were greatly decreased. Today, females are just as likely to be in the military, and that chance at building an intimate relationship while in the military, while being stationed in other countries or in a different state, your chances at building that intimate relationship are at least there. These are my references as far as the book and my annotated bibliography go, and I thank you for watching.